94 million Americans are walking around right now with blood sugar levels quietly creeping toward dangerous territory, and most of them have no idea. But here's what's even more alarming. A large portion of those people are actually trying to do the right things. They're watching their meals, they're taking their medications, they're even exercising, and yet, every single day, they're making one small invisible mistake that undoes all of that effort in under 20 minutes. They sit down after they eat. Now pause right here for a second, because I know what you're thinking. That sounds completely normal. And that's exactly the problem. Dr. Rubio Santner from Metabolic Health Simplified has spent years analyzing the research on post-meal glucose behavior, and what clinical evidence reveals is genuinely stunning. A short, easy walk taken within 30 minutes of finishing your meal can reduce your blood sugar spike by up to 30%, outperforming a longer, more intense workout done hours later. Your muscles, it turns out, are the most powerful blood sugar disposal system your body owns, but only if you activate them at exactly the right moment. Have you noticed your energy crashing an hour or two after meals lately? That crash has a name, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to stop it. Number 1. Most people think digestion is a slow, quiet, invisible process happening somewhere deep in the background, like a computer running updates while you sleep. Calm, gradual, under control. But here's the reality: your doctor rarely has time to explain during a 10-minute appointment. The moment you swallow your last bite, whether that's a bowl of oatmeal, a slice of whole wheat toast, or even something you thought was perfectly healthy, your digestive system immediately begins breaking that food down into glucose. And within 15 to 30 minutes, that glucose doesn't trickle into your bloodstream. It floods it. Think of it like this. Imagine a dam holding back an enormous reservoir of water. The moment digestion kicks into gear, that dam opens, and a powerful surge of sugar rushes directly into your blood. Your pancreas detects that surge and scrambles to release insulin, essentially trying to redirect all of that incoming glucose into your cells for energy. Now, in a younger, metabolically healthy body, that system works like a well-trained traffic controller. Everything moves smoothly. Glucose in, insulin dispatched, cells absorb it, blood sugar returns to baseline. But here's what changes after 50. Research published in leading metabolic journals suggests that insulin sensitivity, meaning how efficiently your cells respond to that insulin signal, can decline significantly with age. And when your cells become even slightly resistant to insulin's signal, that flood of glucose has nowhere to go. It sits in your bloodstream, circulating, elevating, and quietly triggering a cascade of internal inflammation that most people never feel until the damage has already accumulated over years. Still with me? Good, because this is the foundation everything else builds on today. Here's the number that should stop you cold. Studies indicate that the average post-meal blood sugar spike in adults over 50 with insulin resistance can peak nearly 40% higher than in metabolically healthy individuals of the same age. Even when eating the exact same meal, same food, 40% higher spike. That's not a small difference. That's the biological gap between a body managing its glucose and a body quietly struggling every single time you finish eating. And the most important word in that entire sentence? Every single time. Because this isn't happening once a week on the days you eat something indulgent. This is happening 3 times a day, 7 days a week, at every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, inside a body that never gets a full recovery window between spikes. Why does this matter to your everyday energy? Because those repeated, unresolved glucose surges are one of the primary drivers behind that deep, heavy fatigue that sets in an hour after you eat. That foggy, sluggish, I need to sit down feeling that so many people over 50 have simply accepted as a normal part of aging. It isn't normal, it's a signal. Now pause right here for a second, because once you understand what's happening inside your bloodstream after every meal, number 2 is going to hit very differently. Because the single most common thing people do the moment they finish eating is the exact behavior that locks that glucose spike in place and prevents your body from clearing it. Number 2. Here's a scene that probably sounds familiar. You finish a decent meal. Maybe it was a home-cooked dinner, some chicken, a side of rice, a few vegetables. You feel satisfied, comfortable, and completely naturally, you move to the couch, settle into your favorite chair, and let your body rest. Maybe you turn on the news. Maybe you scroll through your phone for a few minutes. It feels like the most reasonable thing in the world. And biologically speaking, it is quietly one of the most damaging post-meal decisions your metabolism can make. Here's why. Your skeletal muscles, the large muscle groups in your legs, your thighs, your calves, are not passive passengers in your body. They are active, hungry metabolic engines. And what most people don't realize is that muscle tissue is responsible for absorbing up to 80% of the glucose that enters your bloodstream after a meal. 80%. That means your legs, not your pancreas, are actually your body's primary blood sugar management system. Your pancreas releases the insulin. But your muscles are the ones doing the heavy lifting of actually pulling that glucose out of circulation and converting it into usable cellular energy. Now here's where sitting becomes the hidden villain in this story. When you sit down immediately after eating, your largest muscle groups go almost completely silent. Electrical activity in your leg muscles drops to near zero within minutes of seated rest. And when those muscles go quiet, their ability to absorb incoming glucose drops right along with them. So that flood of sugar we talked about in Chapter 1, that powerful post-meal glucose surge rushing into your bloodstream, it now has dramatically fewer open doors to enter through. The insulin is circulating, the signal is being sent, but the receiving end of that signal, your muscle cells, have essentially closed for business. The result? That glucose stays elevated in your bloodstream significantly longer than it should. And the longer it stays elevated, the more oxidative stress and low-grade inflammation it generates against your blood vessel walls, your nerve endings, and the delicate cellular machinery that keeps your organs functioning cleanly. Why does this matter to your long-term health picture? Because research indicates that repeated, prolonged post-meal glucose elevation is one of the strongest independent predictors of accelerating insulin resistance over time. Every time that spike goes unresolved, your cells become incrementally more resistant to insulin's signal, making the next spike slightly higher, and the one after that slightly higher still. It's a slow, compounding cycle, and sitting after every meal is quietly feeding it, one comfortable evening at a time. Now, I want to ask you something genuinely. How many meals a day do you sit down immediately after finishing? One? All three? Most people, when they really think about it, realize the answer is every single one. And that's not a character flaw. Nobody ever told you this was a variable worth paying attention to. But now you know. And here's the part that should genuinely excite you. Because while sitting locks that glucose spike in place, there is a specific window of time after your meal where a single simple behavior can intercept that spike before it peaks. It requires no gym, no equipment, no special shoes. And in number 3, you're going to find out exactly how narrow and how powerful that window really is. Number 3, let's talk about timing, because in metabolic health, when you do something often matters just as much as what you do. And nowhere is that truth more powerful or more actionable than in the 30 minutes immediately following your last bite of food. Here's what the research actually shows. A landmark study published in the journal Sports Medicine examined the effect of walking at different times relative to meal consumption. Researchers compared 3 groups. One group walked before eating, one group walked 30 or more minutes after eating, and one group walked within 15 to 30 minutes of finishing their meal. The results were not even close. The group that walked within that early post-meal window showed the most significant reduction in blood sugar peaks, outperforming both the pre-meal walkers and the delayed walkers by a meaningful clinical margin. And the walk itself wasn't long. It wasn't intense. We're talking about a gentle, easy-paced walk lasting as little as 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That's it. Now pause right here for a second, because I want you to really absorb what that means. Not an hour at the gym, not a structured cardio session. A 10-minute easy walk around your neighborhood, down your hallway, or even in place in your living room, taken within 30 minutes of eating, can produce measurably better blood sugar outcomes than a longer workout performed later in the day. Why does the timing matter so dramatically? Because blood glucose doesn't peak instantly after you eat. It climbs, gradually at first, then more steeply, reaching its highest point typically between 45 and 90 minutes after your first bite, depending on what you ate and your individual metabolic rate. Think of that glucose curve like a rising wave building offshore. If you activate your muscles early, while that wave is still forming, your muscle cells intercept the incoming glucose before it crests. They pull it out of circulation during the climb, flattening the peak before it reaches its highest point. But if you wait until that wave has already crashed, until glucose has already spiked, already triggered the insulin surge, already set off the inflammatory cascade, you're no longer preventing the damage. You're simply recovering from it. And for a body dealing with insulin resistance, recovery takes significantly longer than prevention. Still with me? Good. Because this distinction between interception and recovery is one of the most underappreciated concepts in practical metabolic health management. Here's the clinical number worth holding on to. Research models suggest that initiating light physical movement within 30 minutes post-meal can reduce peak post-meal glucose elevation by somewhere between 22% and 30% compared to remaining sedentary. And for adults over 50 managing prediabetes or early insulin resistance, that reduction isn't just a statistic. That's the difference between a glucose reading that stays within a healthy functional range and one that repeatedly tips into the territory that accelerates long-term metabolic damage. 22 to 30%. From a 10-minute walk. Now I want you to think about something for just a moment. If someone told you that 10 minutes of easy movement after dinner could reduce one of the most damaging internal processes in your body by nearly a third, would that feel worth trying tonight? Most people say yes immediately, and then they ask the same practical question. Exactly how do I do this correctly to get the full benefit? That's precisely what number 4 covers. Because there's a right way and a less effective way to execute this habit. And the difference between the two comes down to just a few simple adjustments that anyone can make starting with their very next meal. Number 4. So now you understand the biology. You understand the window, and you're probably thinking, okay, this sounds completely doable. I can take a short walk after eating. How hard can it be? And the honest answer is, it isn't hard at all. But there are a few specific details that separate a walk that genuinely moves the needle on your blood sugar from one that feels productive but delivers about half the benefit. Let's break this down practically. The first detail is the one we've already established. But it's worth repeating because it's the most critical variable in this entire habit. Start within 30 minutes of your last bite, not an hour later, not after the news segment ends, within 30 minutes. Set a gentle reminder on your phone if you need to. Put a sticky note on the refrigerator. Whatever anchor works for your routine, use it. Because that timing window is the entire engine behind why this habit works so powerfully. The second detail is pace. And this is where a lot of people either overcomplicate or undershoot the habit entirely. You do not need to power walk. You do not need to break a sweat. You do not need to hit a target heart rate or wear a fitness tracker. The research supporting post-meal glucose reduction was largely conducted at what exercise scientists describe as a light to moderate conversational pace, meaning you should be able to hold a full, comfortable conversation while walking without feeling winded. Think of it as a relaxed evening stroll rather than a workout. Your goal here isn't cardiovascular conditioning. Your goal is muscle activation. You are simply waking up those large leg muscle groups, your quadriceps, your hamstrings, your calves, and signaling them to open their glucose absorption channels and get to work clearing your bloodstream. Now pause right here for a second. This is an important distinction because pushing too hard immediately after eating can actually redirect blood flow away from your digestive system and toward your working muscles too aggressively, occasionally causing discomfort or nausea in some individuals. Easy and consistent is the target, not intense and occasional. The third detail is duration. And this is genuinely the most encouraging part of this entire conversation. 10 minutes is the minimum effective dose supported by research. 10 to 15 minutes produces reliable, measurable blood sugar benefits for most adults. If you feel good and want to extend to 20 minutes, wonderful. That additional time compounds the benefit further. But 10 minutes is the threshold that matters, and 10 minutes is something virtually everyone reading this can find after at least one meal per day. If outdoor walking isn't accessible, maybe the weather is poor, maybe mobility is a consideration, maybe you simply prefer staying indoors. Light indoor movement produces comparable results. Walking in place during a television commercial break, a gentle circuit through your home, even light standing and slow movement around your kitchen while putting dishes away can meaningfully engage those muscle groups during that critical post-meal window. Still with me? Good. Because here's the fourth and final practical detail, and it's the one most people completely overlook. Consistency across meals multiplies the benefit dramatically. A single post-meal walk is genuinely useful, but research on habitual post-meal movement suggests that practicing this habit consistently across multiple meals per day, particularly after breakfast and dinner, which tend to produce the largest glucose spikes in most adults, creates a compounding metabolic effect over time. Your muscle cells become progressively more efficient at glucose uptake. Your baseline insulin sensitivity begins to shift, and the overall area under your daily glucose curve, meaning the total accumulated blood sugar load your body processes every single day, starts to meaningfully decline. Which brings us directly to the question you're probably already asking yourself. How long does it actually take to see and feel a real difference in your energy levels, your post-meal comfort, and your blood sugar readings? Because number 5 answers that question with something genuinely remarkable, a look at what clinical observations suggest happens inside your body across the first 2 weeks of this single habit practiced consistently. And some of those internal changes begin far sooner than most people expect. Number 5. 2 weeks. That's not a long time. In the grand timeline of your health history, the years of dietary choices, lifestyle patterns, and metabolic shifts that have accumulated inside your body, 14 days feels almost insignificant. But here's what makes post-meal walking genuinely different from most health interventions people attempt after 50. The benefits don't wait for weeks to begin. They start at meal 1. Let's walk through what the evidence suggests happens inside your body when you commit to this habit consistently, starting from the very first day and building through that 2-week marker. Day 1. First post-meal walk. Within minutes of beginning that easy 10-minute stroll, your leg muscles activate their glucose transport channels, specialized cellular doorways called GLUT4 transporters, without even requiring insulin to open them. This is a critical biological detail. Most glucose absorption into muscle cells requires insulin as the key, but physical movement triggers a completely separate insulin-independent pathway that opens those same cellular doors through muscle contraction alone. For someone dealing with insulin resistance, where insulin's key is already struggling to fit the lock, this is enormously significant. Your muscles don't need to wait for a weakened insulin signal. Movement itself becomes the master key. Now pause right here for a second, because that single mechanism is why post-meal walking produces measurable blood sugar benefits, even in individuals whose insulin resistance is already advanced. You are bypassing the broken lock entirely and opening the door through a completely different mechanism. By the end of your first week of consistent post-meal walking, research models suggest your body begins experiencing something beyond individual glucose management. Your muscles start retaining a metabolic memory of repeated activation. GLUT4 transporter density, meaning the actual number of those glucose absorption doorways present in your muscle cells, begins to increase with consistent use. More doorways mean more capacity to absorb incoming glucose efficiently at every subsequent meal. Think of it this way. The first time you walk after a meal, you're opening the doors that already exist. But by the end of week 1, your body is quietly building new doors, and every new door represents expanded metabolic capacity that persists even when you're at rest. Still with me? Good, because week 2 is where the changes become something you can genuinely feel rather than just measure. Clinical observations of adults over 50 who adopted consistent post-meal walking habits reported several overlapping improvements within the 10 to 14-day range. Post-meal energy crashes, that heavy, foggy afternoon slump, began reducing noticeably. Sleep quality showed measurable improvement in a significant portion of participants, likely connected to more stable evening glucose levels. And perhaps most meaningfully, fasting morning blood sugar readings, the number many people with prediabetes monitor most anxiously, showed early downward movement in individuals who practiced the habit consistently across all 3 daily meals. Here's the data point worth carrying with you. A meta-analysis examining the effects of regular post-meal physical activity in adults with impaired glucose tolerance found that consistent practice over as little as 2 weeks was associated with a reduction in average post-meal glucose peaks of approximately 29%, alongside early improvements in overall insulin sensitivity markers, 29% in 14 days, from walking, not from a medication adjustment. Not from a complete dietary overhaul, from 10 minutes of easy movement after eating, repeated consistently. Now I want to ask you something directly. How would a 29% reduction in your daily blood sugar spikes change how you feel by 3 o'clock in the afternoon? How would waking up to a lower fasting glucose number shift your confidence about where your metabolic health is heading? Those aren't abstract questions. Those are the real lived outcomes that this habit, simple, free, and completely within your control, is clinically associated with producing. And here's what makes this particularly powerful for anyone over 50 navigating prediabetes or insulin resistance. Unlike pharmaceutical interventions that work on a single pathway, post-meal walking simultaneously engages multiple metabolic systems at once. It activates insulin-independent glucose clearance. It reduces post-meal inflammatory signaling. It supports healthier overnight glucose regulation. And it begins rebuilding the kind of baseline insulin sensitivity that medications can support but cannot independently restore. Your body already has all the machinery it needs to manage blood sugar more effectively. This habit simply switches it back on. And the beautiful reality is, you don't need to be an athlete. You don't need a gym membership, a fitness tracker, or a structured program. You need a meal, 30 minutes, and 10 minutes of easy movement. That's the entire prescription. Now, if you've been watching this closely, you already have everything you need to begin tonight. But before we close, I want to bring everything we've covered into a single, clear picture and point you towards something that builds directly on top of this foundation. Because what you do in the other 23 hours and 50 minutes of your day matters just as much as those 10 post-meal minutes, and the very next video covers exactly that. Let's bring this full circle. Your body is not broken. It is not failing you. It is responding, predictably, logically, and completely naturally, to the signals and behaviors you give it every single day. And what today's conversation has shown us, from the biology of that post-meal glucose flood all the way through 14 days of measurable internal transformation, is that one of the most powerful metabolic signals you can send your body costs absolutely nothing. 10 minutes, within 30 minutes of eating, at a comfortable, easy pace. That's not a complicated protocol. That's not an overwhelming lifestyle overhaul. That's a walk. But now it's a walk with meaning behind it. Now you understand what's happening inside your bloodstream the moment you take those first steps. You understand that your muscles are pulling glucose out of circulation through a pathway that doesn't even require insulin to function. You understand that every consistent repetition of this habit is quietly rebuilding metabolic capacity that insulin resistance has been gradually eroding. One meal, one walk, one day at a time. And that shift, from passive observer of your own health to someone who genuinely understands the mechanism and chooses to act on it, that's where real, lasting metabolic change begins. I'm Dr. Rubio Santner from Metabolic Health Simplified. If protecting your independence, stabilizing your energy, and making metabolic health genuinely understandable matters to you, hit that subscribe button. Because every single week, we bring you the kind of science-backed clarity that puts you back in control of your own biology. But don't stop here. because what you eat in the meal before that walk determines how powerful this habit actually becomes. And in the next video, we break down the 5 specific foods that dramatically amplify your post-meal glucose response. Foods sitting in most American kitchens right now, disguised as healthy choices. You need to see that list before your next meal.